Welcome to Mwangaza, a podcast that illuminates perspectives through information sharing, examines social issues and good practices from an intersectional human rights perspective across communities, countries, and regions. Join me, Julian Duta, as we engage with inspiring change makers and celebrate ethical communities of practice. We'll be talking about mental health awareness and self-care. I may not be mentally ill, but am I mentally healthy? Mental health includes a holistic view of self, not just about what's going on in the mind. I would know this because after having major changes in my life 2 years ago between working while studying, starting family life, and relocating kind of put me off balance for a while. I'm now settled and I accepted the changes, but what I'm most grateful for is a friend who called me and asked me what my postpartum plan was. That conversation turned into correlating the rates of infanticide with postpartum depression that was never identified or went undiagnosed. Thank you, Waringa, for being that friend. You are a mental health educator, a lawyer, and now a self-published author.
My name is Waringa. Thank you so much, Julian, for inviting me for this podcast episode.
I describe you as a pathfinder for those people who are looking to live an elevated life. Tell me how that transition was from law to another career altogether.
I'm a public health worker who specialized in mental health care, and also all of my legal work is directly related to the mental health industry in this country. So with regard creating laws and policies around mental health, as well as helping companies adopt the current guidelines on mental wellness at the workplace, which have now made mental health policy as well as mental health well-being programs mandatory for all companies in this country. Lawyers are trained to read in between the lines and not just to take things as they are said for face value. It's the thing that has allowed me to speak up for people and advocate for people, even in the moments when I have been on the crossfires or the receiving end of that speaking up. It's the thing that makes me articulate and think through my words. It's the thing that makes me such a good teacher, because a lot of people don't realize that when you're a teacher, you're a sales guy. And ideally, what you're trying to do is to sell this concept to people, because what you're hoping for them to do is not only learn it, but also adopt it as a lifelong practice. I mean, who else is more persuasive in this world than a lawyer? Like, you're taught how to be persuasive. So on top of that, then I become a more kick-ass teacher, because I don't look at my classrooms like classrooms. It's so interesting, but I tend to look at them like almost like a court of law, where my students are the judge that I am convincing why this case has merit, versus all the other things that people have been told about what mental health care is. I've always looked at this as the classroom, as my courtroom, so to speak. And I'm like, in this moment in time, my work here is to persuade you. What I chose to be was to be a public health worker. That one I chose. But when I ended up on this other side, being extremely interested and even creating a whole career and running a whole business in the mental health and wellness space, you're ordained. That one I can promise you, even though I don't think you'd ever have persuaded me to do this in my line of work. Also because my personality sometimes tends to be well suited to be a lawyer and not necessarily a healthcare worker. When I look at the intersection between law and public health, I think for me it's quite obvious why we need a lot more lawyers in the healthcare system and a lot more health workers in the legal system. I just generally would like to say that this career chose me.
That was such an interesting perspective, and I like how you ended it and how you look at it as two, not even two intersecting roads, but two roads that started from two different places but ended up joining to form one highway towards a common goal. So it's definitely an interesting way to hear about how you ended up in the mental health space. We can begin by you just breaking down to us what is mental health and what is mental health awareness.
Mental health is being in your purpose and actualizing your potential while understanding and coping with your daily stressors, working productively and contributing to your community. That is the definition according to WHO. What mental ill health is, just by way of just very quick definition, is just a health, first of all, it's a health condition. And so what it is that you're asking yourself is if cholera affects my stomach, if COVID affects my lungs, then what do mental health conditions affect? So they affect your emotions, they affect your thinking, they affect your behavior, or a combination of these three things. And there's then different variations of that. And then also there's the very physical aspect of it where the brain is a physical organ. And so if you got into an accident or got a traumatic brain injury, cancers of the brain aneurysms, things like bacterial infections like meningitis, affect the physical structure of the brain. Okay. But now you could say quote unquote the non-physical, the what we are really not seeing but is actually being affected as well. And then now it falls on a spectrum. And now on top of that spectrum there's a manual that psychiatrists use to be guided on how to come up with this diagnosis. It is only a psychiatrist who can give you a formal diagnosis of any mental health condition. Mental health consists of 4 elements. The first one, which is the most important, and you could say is the anchoring, grounding, foundational thing of what your mental health is the lifelong question. It's a question that you're never going to have the answer to. The full answer to until death do you part. And it's just the question around who am I? And this question tends to come in the form of what is my purpose? Our true essence, who we truly are, resides in our brains and resides in our minds. And if your true identity, your true self keeps on being suppressed or is buried under so many other things that do not necessarily make sense for you, then you find that it causes you very real and mental and emotional distress. You're not imagining it. Yeah, that again, you don't have to be mentally ill. That means that you don't have to go to a psychiatrist and get a diagnosis of anything. You're not a mentally ill person. And there's a way that you can figure out who that person is. There's very many touch points. Therapy is one of them. It is not the only one. It tends to be highly recommended because professionals, like, your work is cut in half for you, right? Because you will have taken a very, very long time figuring out who you truly are. So, but if you have a therapist who you're compatible with and who truly understands what is going on with you, they cut that journey. They cut it into half, and they allow you to just access yourself a lot faster. For me, off the bat, books. Read books. Also, I must say, you guys, also when we are in a world where when I'm telling you to read a book, you're like, oh my God, you're asking me for too much. Because also somebody through social media, as well as all other short forms of content, has lied to you that taking time to read a book that's a waste of time, because now what essentially is being done to us is that we are being forced to turn something or turn a concept that objectively needs 1,000 pages or objectively needs 500 pages to be explained into a 1 minute reel or into a 1 minute TikTok. I'm like, guys, are we serious? Are we serious? Even everything that you know right now, it did not take you a 30-second Instagram whatever for you to learn it. First of all, you began learning since you were in your parents' womb. You have been learning up until the age that you are right now, and you will continue to learn. With the second pillar, it comes down to stressors. Stress is adaptive. By that I mean that once again, every single thing in your body, including your stress hormones, all of them have work, and they have very important work. For me personally, to not have a self-care practice is honestly to have a sense of hubris. It is to move through the world almost with the ego that says, me, I'm okay. Me, these things are for sijui who. Me, I'm like, it's for me, when I look at you, there's something about you that has a sense of, you think that you are better than other people. Self-caring activities are not, number one, supposed to be expensive. In fact, that they should not cost you any money, because what a lot of people don't understand is that at the heart of public health care is that we work to prevent illness, all illnesses, physical illness and mental illnesses, by teaching you how to take care of yourself at the household level, which is something known as primary health care. So that then there are things that you do every day at the household level that ensure that you don't get sick. And taking care of yourself is that equivalent for your mental health. Being woke is you wanting to seem like the kind of person who takes care of yourself. But if I just scratch the surface a little bit, there's nothing that is happening in real life. And that is the effect a lot of us professionals are experiencing and currently dealing with. Creating a list and listing, these are the things that stress me out, is the first step of awareness. And then the second thing is, what self-care activities can I choose to help me manage and cope with this stress healthily? Then the third pillar that makes mental health is working productively. So here you're asking yourself, what does work mean to you? What does productivity mean to you? And that you define it for yourself. Nobody needs to come and define it for you. A big reason why you could say we are having a generational fight at the workplace currently around how Gen Zs are operating with work and how other generations operate at work. It's simple. It just comes down to they have chosen to define for themselves what working productively means. And Gen Z, I think, are the smartest right now because they are moving from a place of understanding that when you define what work means for you, when you define what productivity means for you, kwa nini uko kazini? What are you doing at work? And because a lot of us don't bother to ask ourselves that question, it is no wonder that our workplaces are some of the most dysfunctional. Our workplaces are, as a standalone entity, causing a majority of us very, very real mental and emotional distress and placing us on the spectrum of mental illness. There's no act that you're going to do for your mental health that does not have a direct return to community. And now your community here is where your roles play. Is your community your family? Is it your friends? Is it your workplace? Is it your country? Because remember, part of the roles that we play is being citizens of our countries and asking, how am I contributing? And the question here you need to be asking yourself all the time is, what changes, what shifts because I am in this space? So a lot of us also have become very irresponsible with our energy, very irresponsible with how we carry ourselves. So you move in and out of spaces, in and out of environments the way you feel like, because you've also put it on some people like Waringa to carry for you mental safety. So you're like, or emotional safety. So you don't understand that you, simply by being an individual, even without saying anything, just by existing, and you coming into this space, something is going to shift. If you're not conscious about the kind of power that you carry everywhere that you go, then you make spaces inadvertently very harmful and very dangerous, because then you don't realize that just by you coming without what is this called, being a situational awareness of the room, understanding who is in the room, understanding why you are there, understanding how all your power dynamics are going to come into play. When you're not consistent, that's now where the world of consciousness, mindfulness comes in. And when all the definition of mental health being those four things, when you're then aware, awareness means this thing was not anywhere in your radar, you had no clue it existed, and then now it has been brought into your awareness. When you're now aware that this thing is happening, when you're aware that my mental health consists of four things, which is, what is my purpose and am I living authentically? What are my stressors? Am I aware of them and how can I cope with them healthily? What does work mean for me and what does productivity mean for me, and am I working productively? And subsequently, how am I contributing to my community? When you are aware of how these four things are consistently playing out, there's no point they ever pause, there's no point they ever stop. Everywhere you go, there you are, and one of those elements, or even sometimes all four of those elements, come into play. And That's juggling. And all four of them are glass balls that you're needing to keep on juggling. There's none that you can let to fall and break. And that is why the jargon around doing the work. That is why the work is so difficult. That's why it's so confronting. That's why a lot of people avoid anything to do with mental health. And it is such the most beautiful scapegoat is I'm not mentally ill. And I'm like, oh wow, this is such a beautiful scapegoat because it's true. You're not mentally ill. It's true. Even though you went to a psychiatrist and got a diagnosis, you're not a mentally ill person. That is very true. But the thing is that, are you a mentally healthy person? That is the question very many people have refused to ask themselves, are avoiding and are running away from. And inadvertently, as a result, the people who need a lot more support, people who are having mental health conditions that are debilitating, that are affecting their lives and affecting the lives of their loved ones, those people who need so much support are now getting buried and lost in all of these wokeisms, all of this, you're not good for my mental health, all of this, my therapist said, all of this jargon and all of this language. But when you truly look at it, if we are all truly doing the work, the world does not need to be looking the way it's looking like right now. We have become very good at and very adept at knowing how to take a picture with the appropriate lighting, in the appropriate setting. We've gotten very good at curating our lives and curating our lives to look like an event as opposed to your actual real life. We have gotten good at sounding exactly, and this you could call them wokeisms, right? So I'm in therapy. My therapist told me all of this pop culture, pop therapy, lingo and jargon, so to speak, that when you say it, you sound woke, which up to includes people, what is this called? Avoiding being in relationships. And being in relationships here does not mean being in a romantic relationship. No, people are genuinely avoiding being in relationships with their family members and their relatives, with their friends, with their co-workers, and with what is just with neighbors. And neighbors here is the people who are around you. You don't have to know them directly. Yeah, and we're avoiding that because we don't know how to communicate, not just with ourselves only, but also with other people. And it shows out in real life. Your picture can look like $1,000,000. You can look really good on that photo, but that photo does not translate into you being able to be the kind of person who is about conflict resolution. Because right now, a lot of us are thriving in outrage and conflict, and we are pissed and we are angry at so many things, rightly so. But you speaking in wellness terms, right? Like for example, being like, I need to end this relationship with you because you're not good for my mental health. What does that even mean? Like at the end of the day, like if we are truly in a relationship, then we need to figure out what it looks like for both of us to be well, for this relationship to thrive. And so a majority of us in our generation, I'll speak mostly for millennials and generations below millennials, because I tend to understand that a lot better, is just more of the recognition that we don't really know how to relate with each other, that we don't really know how to communicate, that we don't really understand what taking care of ourselves is outside of consumerism. You cannot say that you're a mentally healthy person, and when I look at the community around you, it's disintegrated and broken. You cannot say that you're a mentally healthy person, and how you deal with things is through ghosting, canceling, and avoiding situations. You do not have to have a mental illness, and people need to stop conflating those two things. Mental health and mental illness are two very different things. And you do not have to have any mental illness at all, for you to be all day, every day, taking care of and thinking about the implications of your mental health in relation to yourself and in relation to other people. I run away from anything that is pop therapy leaning or wokeisms or sounds like this wellness language that people are starting to learn so that you can sound like you're a little bit woke or you're a little bit ahead of the curve. Because I'm like, it truly, if you truly understand what mental health is for yourself. When all those things are said to you, what does that mean? What does that mean to you as a person? And when you start to then interrogate it, you start to realize that, wait, yes, I can go through the profession to understand what my mental health is, but I have very many other avenues and very many other touch points. And what I'm needing to understand, for example, is the fundamental concept behind this thing, right? So when you hear the word self-care, go and research extensively on what does the word self mean? What does the word caring mean? When they come together, what do they mean for you? Then now research extensively and find different people who are saying different things about it until you sit with yourself and you come up with your own definition of this is what this thing means for me and this is how I'm going to move forward with regard approaching it. When you were talking about things like stressors, when Waringa says stress is adaptive, for me the stressor that we are working on to reduce its you could say negative effects on the body is cortisol, which tends to be highest in the morning, and that's why you're encouraged to do something for yourself in the morning because that's the stress hormone that you reduce. But you see, you can never eradicate cortisol because cortisol also works too when you're feeling hungry, that sense of unasikia uko na appetite or you're feeling like you want to eat, cortisol is also at work there. But then now, when you understand how cortisol as a stress hormone works, then if you're a person who stress eats, or when you're feeling what is this called, emotions that are and feelings that are overwhelming you, and you reach out for food for comfort, it is not a random thing that is happening to you. It is because this is a hormone that is produced when you're feeling stress. So it affects other parts of your functioning, but it also makes you hungry. So that then when you're shamed about eating when you're feeling stress, and yet your own body was wise enough to create that mechanism, then it's important that you understand it, that you understand how adrenaline plays, how that's now why you pay me to teach you all of these things. Because when you're able to start intersecting this, it stops being a random occurrence, what is happening to you. You start to have a lot of compassion and a lot of grace for why certain things are happening the way they are. You start to also understand that your body by design is a very intelligent being, but also has its limitations. And because it has its limitations, where can you come in and plug yourself? Where can you come in and support yourself? Where can you come in and create a soft landing for yourself? Because the thing that you know is that life is challenging. That is just the promise of life. Life is challenging, but life should not be abusive, should not be tormenting, should not be dysfunctional and toxic, should not be extracting and depleting you of your talent, of your creativity, of your value, of your youth, of your innocence. Life should not be terror. It should not be a consistent feeling of terror. And unfortunately, that is the world we have designed for ourselves as we speak. And even more unfortunately, we have normalized it. We have normalized some certain levels of violence, of dysfunction, and especially that thing. A lot of us are feeling a lot of pain, not because of the challenge of life, but because of being extracted, being depleted of your creativity, being depleted of your energy, of your resources, of the value that you have to offer. Like people just come and they suck the life out of you and they leave you there for dead.
Wow. The thing that has come up for me is that before you're even aware of yourself, you have to do the work to identify who you are. Then, number two, once you identify who you are, you also have to identify what it is that is missing and educate yourself about it, or get educated, whether that's by means of therapy or by you reading. And then how you, now touching base on what you just ended with in terms of relationships and how you relate with other people, because apart from being who you are, you relate with other people and the environment around you, right? And so if you're not interacting with people from a healthy place, you tend to affect your environment in one way or another. And this interaction could be what we are calling toxic interactions. This could be leaving people empowered or better than you left them.
If nothing else persuades you in this podcast episode, the thing that you need to understand is that at the heart of what healthcare is to make it easy for you to not get sick. That is why healthcare workers are trained the way we are trained. We do recognize that sometimes you will, for whatever reason, cross paths with sickness. But then that is why the healthcare industry thought it wise to create a whole other cadre known as public health, where as our work, right now we've been rebranded to community health promoters. Right now our work is that coming door to door to door to door, ensuring that you're healthy. In preventative healthcare, which is now the arm that is public health, we cannot make it difficult for you. We cannot make it hard for you to adopt a practice around self-care. And that's why the activities that you choose have cannot be difficult. When they start being packaged as spas and massages and all of these lofty things, it's simply because of a very basic business principle around I need to create a need. Otherwise, you're not going to buy it. And so it's very difficult for me to sell you breathing exercises, but I can create a whole retreat around it and sell you the retreat. I can put center myself as the personality and say that this is Waringa's breathing exercise and then charge you for that. But the thing to note is that exercises around taking care of yourself, number one, are free. That means they do not cost you money. They are difficult to do and challenging because just like any other habit that you're trying to form that is good for you, it's going to push you a little bit, but it's not impossible. And it's something that when you're doing it, it has to be able to, when you choose it, it has to be able to support you when you're your absolute worst. When your mental health is compromised, it will show up in different types of symptoms that include isolating yourself, not wanting to deal with people, not wanting to come out of your space, or sometimes not even wanting to be in the house. It's going to make you behave very differently when you're in this state, when you're in this moment in time, and you are struggling with everything about your life. This activity does not act as a miracle or as a cure. It acts as a soft landing. It acts as a reminder that things might not be okay right now, but I am important. And even though everything else is falling apart, I'm important. And that act of preserving yourself, rejuvenating yourself, maintaining yourself buys you another day, buys you an extra day. And the extra day could be a life or death for you. A lot of us are on the suicidal spectrum right now, and what it is that we are struggling with is the reality of, is this life truly worth living? And when you're the kind of person who takes care of yourself, that reality remains the same. Is this life truly worth living? But the thing that you appreciate is, because I'm doing something for myself, the internal environment that you have in your mind and in your brain allows you to be like, okay, today might have been a challenging day, but I can make it tomorrow. And there's the narrative around you cannot heal in environments that broke you. I'd beg to differ a little bit. Because again, dear African, dear black body, dear human who lives in this continent, we will have to heal in the environment that broke us. Because the first thing that narrative completely negates is that just by living in this continent alone is the breaking. Simply by that, simply, simply, and just by the mere fact that you live in this Africa is the broken environment. And so we will need to start to heal in this broken environment, because that narrative for me, unfortunately, what it does is that it is having people postpone their well-being until the day they move out, postpone their well-being until the day they have access to country X outside of Africa, postpone their health, postpone their mental wellness until further notice, until the day they're no longer living in this environment. But to be honest with you, that same environment that broke you, unfortunately, is the same environment that is you're going to need to figure out how to heal in that environment. And for me, I don't speak from a place of what is this called not knowing. I created my self-care practice because I was in the environment that was breaking me every day. And I try to think right now, if I waited until 2020 when my mom passed on for me to start to take care of myself, oh my goodness, I don't think we would be having this conversation right now, because what I know for a hard fact is that I would have died by suicide in 2020. I know, that one I know. I cannot even be convinced otherwise. But simply because in 2015, I sat with myself and I was like, there's nothing about this environment that is changing. In fact, if anything, it is getting worse and worse and worse. When I'm looking at myself, I'm wondering, oh my goodness, am I going to make it? And that recognizing that I actually began to take care of myself in the environment that I was told first I have to move out for me to be able to care for myself. That thing of waiting for the day 10 planets align, and your 10 planets could look like anything. When I have enough money, when I have moved out from this place, when I've gotten an opportunity in another continent, when, I promise you that day will not come. But what for sure is going to come is the thing I was alluding to earlier around having a nervous breakdown. That is going to happen to you. And having a nervous breakdown has nothing to do with having a mental illness. Having a nervous breakdown or a mental breakdown is your whole system shutting down because your brain cannot take it anymore. And that shutdown, for a lot of us, lands us in hospitals. That shutdown shows up as you losing almost all of your relationships. That shutdown shows up as you attempting suicide. That shutdown shows up as you not being able to work anymore, not feeling confident in yourself, not being able to present yourself with your best foot forward because you feel so inferior and so inadequate. That is the breakdown. The breakdown is not this madness you're imagining that is going to come and find you and you start removing all your clothes and shouting everywhere and yelling everywhere and moving like and even that really is not what mental illness is. That is a narrative that was created around fear. And when you don't look at yourself as a very fragile thing, you're very fragile. And when you're very fragile, like glass, you need to be taken care of. And that means that with the same fortitude that glass has to hold hot water and also to hold cold water, it can also break. And if you recognize that this thing can break, then you take care of it. But to move from the place of this thing is for other people and not me, I think is the first point of interrogation, because it is an indicator that you don't think you deserve anything. It's an indicator that you don't think you're worthy of anything. And being in that frame of mind is so dangerous, because that frame of mind is worse sometimes than even having an active mental illness. The compounded interest of staying there long enough is so dangerous and has almost absolutely nothing to do with being mentally ill. And that is what you need to understand when you ask the question. It's true, you might not have a mental illness, but are you mentally healthy? Stigma is the irrational fear of something where you cannot explain why you're scared of it. You're just scared of it. And because of stigma related particularly to mental health care, people who are in dire need of support, in dire need of treatment, have been buried even further by this woke industrial complex. People who are in very active distress, mental and emotional distress. You're not mentally ill, but you're in very active distress. You're highly likely suicidal. You're busy here online lying to us you're okay with a good aesthetic and some words that sound and some lingo and some jargon that sounds like you're okay. So and that is the collective problem we are currently going through. Therapy is a science, and it's an evidence-based science that has been tried and tested and is actually regulated globally. So you cannot say that this thing does not work. No, that's not true, because if it did not work, then it is irresponsible for a whole scientific fraternity to continue to push something that does not work. It works. The practitioner, the person themselves, and that's why stigma around mental health does not ever give us the permission to see that you have options. So where you have a very deep understanding that if you went to see a gynecologist or you went to see a cardiologist or an oncologist and they didn't work for you, we don't even think twice. We're like, I've got for a second opinion. But the moment you cross paths with a therapist that didn't understand you or didn't get you, or like the vibe wasn't vibing, you're like, this therapy, yeah, you just throw the baby with the bathwater. You're like, this therapy thing doesn't work. It does work. So that's the same thing even with alternative practices to healing and to well-being and wellness. They do work because people, the kind of people who use astrology, people who use different religions, all of those are different well-being techniques. That's why, like, I can never negate the place for religion, but religion is not a cure. So we cannot pray away the mental illness, or we cannot pray for you until you become mentally healthy. Those things, that does not make sense. But you can use prayer as a self-care activity. You can use meditation. You can use religion. You can whatever, like, you can use it as a tool for your wellness, but it is not the end all for us to be mentally healthy as an individual. It is the work of the collective to ensure that we are all mentally healthy. And that's usually the catch 22 with health, is that health is a social thing. It's a thing that other people and environments dictate more than you're willing to admit. Thank you so much, Julian, for this opportunity. And I really appreciate you giving me entrusting my opinion and my thoughts.
Thank you, Waringa, for such an incredible session. Even as we go along with this podcast, with good intention, we may bring up issues or topics that will be triggering, or we shall open Pandora's box and take you down rabbit holes. It would be irresponsible or not being trauma-informed to leave you on a cliffhanger without equipping you with the necessary tools to calm yourself as you listen or keep your mind at ease at the end of each episode. Waringa here provides a solution by doing a mental health check and having a simple self-care routine. Remember, moves from a healthy perspective and practices well-being tools. You will recognize that in addition to being self-aware, mental health includes a holistic view of self, not just about what is going on in the mind. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Waringa, for your contribution in the mental health space, and we hope that the valuable insight in this episode was beneficial for you. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode. Kwaheri.